Hey everyone, and welcome back to Papaarade. I'm Robert, your go-to guy on cultural differences between the US and Germany, especially when it comes to family life and parenting. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe if you're fascinated by how families on both sides of the Atlantic navigate raising kids. And for our returning viewers, thank you so much for joining us again. Today, I'm especially excited. If you haven't heard, Martin and I are getting ready to welcome our first child, so these topics are personal for us right now. We've been researching and talking to parents and really digging into some of the official policies in both countries to understand the ins and outs of early childhood education. So today, I'll be discussing one of the biggest and most emotional stages for new parents, childcare and early education. I'll be focusing on how Germany handles this critical period called Eingewöhnung, basically the gradual introduction into daycare, versus the way that things work in the US. So buckle up because some of these differences are really going to surprise you. Let's set the scene. In Germany, the main form of childcare outside of the home is Kita, short for Kindertagesstätte. They come in all shapes and sizes, many run by church groups, especially the Catholic Church. Some are attached to big companies for their employees, and some small family-like centers called Tagesmutter, where a caregiver looks after 3 or 4 kids. Kids here typically start around age 1 to 3, which is often after a mother or father ends their parental leave. In Germany, kids staying in Kita for the full day is rare, I would say, as one of the parents is expected to have more of a part-time work arrangement. Now in the US, things look different. It's not uncommon for American parents to be searching for daycare slots for their 3 or even 2-month-old infants. Parental leave in the States is, let's be blunt, pretty limited, but that's a whole nother topic. Many parents are already returning to work after a couple weeks or a couple of months. This one fact alone, how long parents can stay home with their babies, shapes so many differences in parenting cultures, family dynamics, and pressures. My German friends are surprised by American parents sending babies to daycare so young. But it really often comes down to this, that Americans simply don't have much of a choice. Here's where things start to get interesting if you're a new parent. In Germany, an actual legal right to a daycare spot once a child is 12 months old. And yes, the reality can be complicated because there is kind of a shortage of daycare places, especially in big cities. You might be put on a waiting list, especially in a city like Munich, which has a high birth rate. And really there, finding a daycare convenient to where you live is extremely difficult, and if you have multiple kids, they may not even be able to go to the same daycare, or if you want your child to go to a vegan daycare, which are super rare, you might not be so lucky. Luckily, where we live, however, this is not an issue. There's plenty of space, so thank goodness for that. However, despite certain specific challenges, there's still nevertheless a legal framework, and the government is supposed to help you. In the US, there's, however, no such promise. Childcare is fully privatized. Parents often sign up for daycare waiting lists early in pregnancy or even before. I even have a friend who toured daycares before announcing their pregnancy to their family. That was in New York City, where it's also a bit difficult, but talk about pressure. And with that kind of planning, sometimes it's still impossible to find a spot when you need it. Some parents have to hire nannies as a backup plan, which of course is just another expense and level of complication. But that brings up the cost. In many German states, monthly costs range from about 100 to 300 euros, and free in places like Berlin. The prices are subsidized by the government, making childcare accessible for nearly everyone regardless of income. In the US, however, average daycare costs can range from $1,200 up to $2,000 or more just for one child. In some cities, it's downright unaffordable for many families. It can feel like you're paying basically for a second mortgage. So no wonder so many American families rely on grandparents or extended family for help if they can. Let's zoom in on what actually happens in a German Kita compared to American daycare. In Germany, the philosophy is clear. Early childhood is about social and emotional development, not preparing for school academically. This is key. The day is usually structured around free play, outdoor time, even in the winter, by the way, and group activities like singing, crafts, and cooking. There's a big belief in letting children learn at their own pace and fostering independence. One thing that I found fascinating is that many German kitas have their own little gardens where kids can plant and harvest vegetables, which is great. It's all about learning through practical experiences. Daycares in the US are, however, a mixed bag, I would say. Some are very play-focused, but there are also many that have a more academic or structured approach, with daily lesson plans even for toddlers. There's often a focus on getting ready for kindergarten, which is different in the US, but early reading, numbers, or other skills. The physical spaces might involve more indoor or kind of like scheduled centers where there's activities. But I mean, the daycare that I went to in the US from about years 3 to 5 was heavily concentrated on learning, which I enjoyed. So, I mean, it's not always negative to have an academic approach. However, for some kids, this can be way too soon, or you're just putting extra pressure on them too early. It can do more harm than good. Now for the centerpiece, the Eingewöhnung, the gradual, gentle transition into daycare that's practically a science in Germany. Let's imagine your child's first day at kita isn't just a quick drop-off. Instead, the parents are expected to stay with your child for several hours, sometimes nearly the full day during the first week or two. On day 1, you and your child explore the new space together, maybe stay for an hour and then leave. However, the next day, you might be there for hours, only to step out for 10 minutes and then return. I don't know, the third day, maybe you leave for 30 minutes, but this time apart gradually increases each day, but only when the child is comfortable. And in those first weeks, the child is really only there for a couple hours, but never the full day. Even if your child is okay with you being away, they may not be okay being around for other kids for hours on end. But I think the point is that caregivers watch for specific cues. Maybe when your child plays happily or stops seeking you constantly, only then do they suggest that you extend your absence a little bit more. For many families, the full process can easily take 2 to 3 weeks, and that is normal here. And I actually know people where this took longer, which a bit surprised me. They had to be super patient, but yeah, even when they thought this process was over, they were still on standby just in case they needed to come back earlier. So why do Germans invest so much in this process? The emphasis is on attachment theory, making sure children build secure bonds with their new caregivers before they're left for long stretches. It's not just about making parents feel better, but actually reducing separation anxiety and stress for children, setting them up to thrive. Contrast that with the typical American approach. Most daycares have a drop off and go philosophy. There might be a brief orientation or some kind of open house, but on your child's first day, you're encouraged or sometimes even told to give a quick goodbye and then leave. And by no means overly emotional. Kids are expected to adjust quickly. And yeah, I know from experience, tears are common, but often seen as a natural part of the process. And yeah, some staff do a great job of comforting the kids, but they're juggling a lot at once. I don't have memories of this transition phase, but I actually do have vivid memories of when my mother was on business trips, for example, and I needed to go to a new daycare facility where I definitely cried for hours on end. It was very sad the whole day. I remember not getting so much support through this because there were just so many other kids there. In Germany, companies and employers are generally understanding about parents needing time for this transition. Flexibility is considered normal, especially if you're returning from parental leave. Employers just expect it. In the US, this sort of accommodation is much less common, and even if you are getting paid leave, it rarely lines up neatly with your childcare needs. Here's something small but meaningful. Meals and hygiene. German kitas usually serve lunches that are warm, balanced, and often freshly cooked on site. Remember that little garden that they sometimes have? They can serve that sometimes, what they grow. But many go the extra mile with special menus for allergies or vegetarian diets. But the key is they teach the kids to brush their teeth with their own toothbrush labeled by name. Sounds simple, but it's actually a wonderful group routine, I feel like. In the US, however, meal policies really vary. Some centers provide hot meals, but plenty ask you to send packed lunches, which, I mean, for parents can add another stress, thinking like, oh, is this healthy enough compared to other kids? Will my kid even eat it? But group toothbrushing is rare and not usually part of daily routines. I remember learning about brushing my teeth in daycare, but not actually doing it in the facility. Nap time, I feel like, is another huge difference. German kitas are flexible. Kids nap if they need to, but it's not required, and there's less pressure, especially after the toddler age, whereas American daycares often have set nap times through preschool, even if some kids don't sleep. Then potty training is handled with a gentle, child-led approach in Germany. Educators work with parents and never rush things. And because the child-to-educator ratios are often better, sometimes as low as 1:5 for young children, kids get more individualized support. In the US, by contrast, many preschools have a hard and fast rule: no diapers after age 3. Parents can feel pressured to speed up potty training before their kid is ready just to keep their daycare spot. Let's talk about learning. In Germany, formal academics, reading, writing, math are off the table in Kita. This can be surprising, I think, for American parents that are accustomed to kind of like flashcard learning, pushing literacy really early, whatever. But social, emotional, and motor development are priorities in Germany until children start Grundschule, which is primary school, at age 6. In the US, particularly in some private centers or in extremely competitive areas like New York City, there's a strong focus on early academics. Flashcards, worksheets, and phonics can be a part of daily life as young as 2 or 3. Both German and American childcare centers are increasingly diverse, reflecting a modern society, which is great. US daycares tend to celebrate a wide array of holidays, for example, Chinese New Year, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, often with themed food and crafts to promote inclusion. In German kitas, there's usually more of an emphasis on local customs, like St. Martin's Day, but diverse backgrounds are increasingly respected and included. Parenting journey has led us to reflect on how different cultures try to balance emotional security with practical realities. Learning about the Eingewöhnung process has really changed my perspective, I must say, because it's not just about separation, but setting up both child and parent for long-term success. Which approach do you prefer? Would you find the German gradual separation less stressful? Or are you more comfortable with American system of quick adaptation? Let us know your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If you were inspired by today's deep dive, subscribe and share this video with anyone who's curious about differences in parenting between the US and Germany. Thank you so much for watching Papaarade, and see you next time.